My name is Maria Gabriela Palacio. I'm an economist by training. I come from Ecuador and I teach at the Faculty of Humanities, mostly in the program of International Studies. Natural sciences deal with nature. I will assume humanities deal with humans. And for me, that's basically what it comes down to, the understanding of human behavior, the understanding of ideas, of the understanding of different ways of organizing societies, and how these different societies interact, how they encounter each other, sometimes resulting in conflict, sometimes resulting in solidarity, communication networks. So it comes down to also the notion of ideas and how we think about society, how we think about thinking about society. I'm an economist by training, so it was not the most obvious place for me to teach in humanities. But I was also trained as interdisciplinary scholar. I come from a field called development studies that is actually drawing from many different disciplines to question the very same idea of development. What does it mean? From that particular position, I entered humanities, searching for the same type of dialogue, looking for conversations with historians, political scientists, people who do the research on religion, cultural studies. What do they have to tell me about my way of problematizing society? Humanities is a very rich place in which something like poverty can be sometimes theorized as something negative in economics. We have to tackle poverty, we have to reduce it. Whereas if you go to anthropology, cultural studies, they will have to tell you, wait a second, aren't you having a particular understanding of the poor by adopting that framework? Have you talked to them? Maybe they have a different experience, a different narrative, in which their livelihoods are actually full of resistance and dignity. I think the essence of humanities is critical thinking. It's a place of social critique. It's a place from which you can ask questions about knowledge creation and reproduction. Who's asking those questions and how those questions have changed over time and across different geographies. The basic way of having an interdisciplinary enriching experience is through dialogue. Just by teaching in a humanities faculty, I'm exposed to different accounts of societal issues. Next to me, I have many faculty members who are looking at similar issues with which I can exchange ideas, and that is already causing a major change in my understanding. But most important, I think the place that for me remains the most radical place for transformation of my thinking is the classroom. When I come to see the students, and I come with a very basic understanding, like, poverty. And I assume we all agree what that means. And they might challenge me completely with questions that come from their own understandings of poverty. And that is a way of social accountability, in which my ideas are not dogmatic. They come back to me, rephrased as questions. I think I'm a big proponent of positive dissent, meaning that you don't take reality for granted. The reality we see today is not the only possible outcome we could have had. Could be different, could be better for some groups that feel that maybe economic growth has not benefited them. If we don't think about alternatives, if we don't think radically away from the frameworks we've been taught, there will be no space for transformation. We will just assume how to perpetuate, or we will learn how to perpetuate the system without the tools to think otherwise. My fascination with social inequality comes from an anecdote very early age. I was 4 or 5 years old. And I'm Latin American, and domestic work is quite common occupation. And still I grew up in this generation of families that have a living domestic, meaning a woman who will live in the house, looking after the children, cleaning the house. To me, she was like a mother, an indigenous woman who was in this position. And I remember when I was 4 or 5 years old, I had a nightmare and I rushed to her bed and I said, like, can you please hug me, Rosa? That was her name. But when I did that, probably my mom heard me. And a beautiful woman with the best intention, still she said to me, wait a second, what are you doing? You're not equal. You cannot go there. At that age, I had the first encounter with gender, race, and class. The thing is that I found a lot of comfort and peace in theorizing about these issues. Because when you theorize about gender, race, or class, it's not only your personal story and the thing that hurts, you understand that that story speaks to many other stories. And then if you see the same story happening elsewhere, you talk about the structure of race and racism, the structure of gender and sexism, the structure of class and maintenance of power and privilege. And that's where the fascination with inequality comes from, actually. As we've seen with the increase of inequality and polarization in societies, it's problematic as the pendulum is moving faster between left and right and to the extremes. In Latin America, I can give you many examples of very violent protests in Bolivia, in Chile, in Ecuador, Argentina, Nicaragua, Haiti. If I could continue. What's happening there? People are no longer waiting for something good to happen to them. The dream of meritocracy, if I work hard, I'll make it, is no longer feasible. And they see that there's major discontent and frustration. And that's what you get when you don't tackle inequality. So inequality, it is one of the main ingredients for revolution, might trigger populations to actually mobilize and claim for different rights, different society, but it might also be a recipe for collapse if it is not responded to by politicians. And you see similar situations happening globally, the levels of polarization that will explain the outcome of Brexit, in which is a combination of actually lack of economic literacy, of people not being able to fully understand or grasp the economic consequences of that decision. Teaching is my passion, both, I think, intrinsically. I come from a family of teachers. My dad was a professor at University of Physics and Mathematics, and my mom was a high school teacher. I grew up in a household in which, though they were badly paid, it was full of joy in the process of learning. So I knew that deep inside I would love to do that as I grow up. But now that I'm actually in the profession of lecture, teaching, I see the power of actually influencing students and just create curiosities. You don't even tell them what to think. You just hope to teach them how to think about thinking, how to have the frameworks to encounter new phenomena and make sense of that. And I think for me that's fascinating because I crave for that moment in which I can have students becoming angry sometimes. I had a student coming today and saying, I'm so upset. I heard your lecture. I've been to Brazil. I know Bolsonaro's policies. I know how he's neglecting the Amazon. I know indigenous peoples are mostly affected by it. And I welcomed him and said, yeah, it's okay to be angry. Now you go home and you do something with that anger and replace it with something stronger that you can actually use it to incite change. That's a classroom for. So I'm part of the teaching staff of a course called Practice in International Studies, PRINCE, as we call it. And this is a very interesting exercise. It brings together practitioners, being these international organizations, governments, NGOs, and university. And this is a way in which we can help students make the transition from the classroom to society. They no longer have to write an essay about a fictional problem in society. They actually listen from organizations what are their knowledge needs and try to bridge the gap from academia to practice. Not only that is important for students to have more practical application of their analysis of their ideas and to develop professional skills, it also allows to collaborate with organizations and inform them in situations as complex as genocide, transitional justice, conflict-prone areas, and how to collect data on food necessities, gender-biased policies, and how to find ways in which they can actually work to the benefit of those that they're trying to protect. So it's also a great space in which we can co-create with these organizations a better informed analysis. Because that's the thing about academia. You can have an opinion about anything. We all have our very strong opinions about climate change, about inclusive language. We have opinions about weather. But do we have an informed opinion? Is that opinion grounded on some sound analysis? That is something academia can provide. I think humanities is in a very difficult position at the moment. Some people have a different understanding of it as being a place for delight, in which you talk about arts and museums. With that very limited understanding of humanities, very few people actually engage with that. And makes me question then, are they afraid of critical thinking? If they don't want people to engage with these debates, if they don't want to question any dogmatic framework, and they just want them to go for problem solving or natural science, which are equally relevant, we all together make up a society. But you don't have a group of people saying, wait a second, are you sure that's the only way of understanding that problem? Have you looked back at history, or have you seen how that understanding has shaped these different outcomes in a completely different geography? It has led to negative consequences. A part of me would like to think that they're just naive, but other part is afraid that it's deliberate, that they don't want people to be critical, because that will maintain the status quo. I think something we can learn about humanities is related with our identity, with self-awareness. And I think that is crucial as our world becomes much more globalized. I think something that humanities can give us is also the historical narrative that explains why do we experience certain issues. For instance, people argue that the world has become much more unequal. Is it true? Was it more equal before? Is this inequality then part of a discourse? Is it real? And that's a critical questioning that humanities allow us to have, in which we can situate certain narratives and read them in their historical, political, geographical context. If we look at public discourse at the moment and the levels of polarization, racism, hate, I think they come down to the notion of fear. When we're kids, you encounter a different child, no matter the background, race, gender, you just have a new friend to play with. But slowly that changes, and you see something different, and you either find it exotic, which is also problematic, or you find it scary, or you think that it's something you should dominate, or something you should run away from. If we don't encounter our own fears, there's no way that we can be inclusive, that we can invite someone to be part of our circle. However, I think that our most important contribution is to actually speak back to society, to have societal relevance. And that is also my training in development studies. I want my knowledge not only to be delightful, something you would like to read or teach about or talk about. I would like this to somehow influence our ways of thinking about reality and possibilities to change it, to improve it. And that's my responsibility as an academic, both in the classroom, when I give students the different frameworks for them to make sense of reality and to add complexity to it. And also as a researcher, producing a type of literature that I hope will lead us to a more socially just world.